There's a moment during every cardiac arrest where the room changes. At first, everything and everyone moves fast. Bags are being opened, pads are being slapped on, hopefully, compressions are starting, airway equipment is being pulled out and passed around, and then suddenly, everything narrows. Now it's just the compressor, the monitor, the timer, and the next decision. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, you can realize something uncomfortable. Despite all the technology, all the medications, all the protocols, a lot of cardiac arrest still comes down to basics. Because in 2026, we have more tools than ever. Mechanical CPR, advanced airway devices, real-time feedback monitors, video laryngoscopy, new research, upgraded algorithms, and yet survival rates still aren't where we want them. So the question becomes, cardiac arrest in 2026, what actually works? Hey y'all, it's me, it's Katie G, and this is the Goldman Hour podcast that will candidly cover current events and other topics in emergency services. If you can survive the Goldman Hour, give or take, of honest and sometimes harsh opinions, stick around and enjoy a fleeting platinum 10 minutes of strict positivity. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check us out for more at easyemsceu.com/podcast. Not the Paulus version, not the conference lecture version, the version that happens at 3 a.m. in cramped living rooms, on bathroom floors, in the back of moving ambulances. Today's episode is one of the most important conversations in emergency medicine. Cardiac arrest in 2026, what actually works. Because if we're honest, EMS has become obsessed with adding things. More equipment, more interventions, more complexity, but better outcomes? Those usually come from doing simple things exceptionally well. And that's what this episode is about. Not trends, not hype, results. Let's start right here with the biggest misunderstanding in cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest is not a medication problem. It's not generally primarily an airway problem. And honestly, it's not even a monitor problem. Cardiac arrest is a perfusion problem. That's it. The entire goal is simple: more oxygenated blood to the brain and heart. That's what matters. Everything else is secondary. But somewhere along the way, providers started focusing more on interventions than outcomes. Let's stop here because this is where people lose the plot. This is your street truth. Cardiac arrest is won or lost on CPR long before any medication matters. Not epinephrine, not advanced airway, not fancy technology. CPR. High quality compressions, minimal interruptions, continuous perfusion. That's what gives patients a chance. Everything else only matters if that foundation exists. That's your street truth. Now let's talk about the problem with busy resuscitations. Walk into enough arrests and you'll notice something. Some scenes feel organized and others feel frantic. And frantic scenes usually have one thing in common. Everyone is doing something, but nobody's controlling the priorities. So what does that look like? One provider trying to intubate, another starting an IV, someone else looking for medications. Meanwhile, compressions become inconsistent. People start to switch too slowly. Pauses get longer and longer and longer, and pulse checks drag on, and suddenly, the one thing that matters the most becomes secondary. The reality is you can do every advanced intervention perfectly and still lose the patient if CPR is poor. This is where pit crew CPR changes everything, because pit crew CPR recognized something important. Chaos kills performance. What pit crew CPR does is it creates structure, because everyone has a role, a responsibility, a position. Nobody freelances and nobody improvises unnecessarily. Everything becomes intentional. So why does it work? Because organized teams minimize interruptions. They reduce confusion. They improve compression quality. And that translates to outcomes. The most important part is pit crew CPR isn't just about assigning jobs. It's about protecting compressions. That's the entire point. Here's your next street truth. The best cardiac arrest teams aren't the busiest teams. They're the most disciplined. Discipline means short pulse checks, controlled airway management, clear communication, and protecting compressions at all costs. Because every unnecessary interruption reduces perfusion, and perfusion is everything. That's your street truth. Let's be honest about something kind of uncomfortable. We have a compression quality problem. A lot of CPR is not very good. Not intentionally, but realistically, it's not very good. So why does this happen? Well, providers fatigue faster than they realize, and compression depths change, and rate drifts, and then leaning happens, and we're not allowing for complete chest recoil. And after just a couple minutes, quality starts dropping dramatically. Even when providers think they're doing fine, they're really not. See, this is human. CPR is physically exhausting, especially in tight spaces and during long arrests and with difficult extrications and in stairwells and in moving ambulances. And that's why systems have started looking for solutions, which brings us to one of the biggest debates in modern EMS, mechanical CPR. I know we've all seen it all over social media, the great mechanical CPR debate of 2026. But we're going to talk about it again. This topic will divide providers fast. Some people love mechanical CPR and others hate it. And honestly, both sides usually miss the real point. The truth is, mechanical CPR is not magical. It does not automatically improve outcomes, but it does solve one major problem: human fatigue. So, what does mechanical CPR do well? Well, it delivers consistent compressions, it eliminates fatigue, it improves safety during transport, and it frees up personnel. And in certain environments, all of that matters a lot, especially in rural EMS or systems with limited manpower, small responding crews, or places with long transport times. The problem is that mechanical CPR also creates risk because bad deployment causes interruptions, and interruptions kill perfusion. So now the question becomes, is the device helping or hurting? Before we go further, let's talk about training. Because cardiac arrest management is not about memorizing an algorithm. It's about understanding priorities under pressure. This episode is brought to you by EasyEMSCEU.com. If you want to improve resuscitation leadership, CPR quality, airway decisions, and team coordination, their courses focus on real-world EMS decision-making. And right now for EMS Week, use promo code EMSWeek40 for 40% off all memberships. That's EMS Week 40 at EasyEMSCEU.com. So what's the real question we should be asking about mechanical CPR? The wrong question is mechanical CPR better? The right question is, can your team maintain high-quality manual CPR consistently? And if the answer is no, then mechanical CPR becomes valuable. The key here is to remember, the device is not the resuscitation. The team is. And if your team loses focus during deployment, then you lose the advantage that mechanical CPR devices offer completely. Great teams ensure that they deploy these devices quickly, that they minimize pauses, and that they continue organized care immediately. They don't stop the resuscitation to place the device. The device supports the resuscitation. It doesn't replace the team. So now we've laid the foundation. We've talked about why CPR matters most: pit crew CPR, mechanical CPR debates, and the danger of chaotic arrests. In the next part, we're going to dive deeper into the epinephrine debate, advanced airway controversies, why interruptions kill outcomes, and the biggest mistake providers still make during arrests. Because cardiac arrest is not about doing more, it's about doing what matters. Let's talk about the medication everyone has an opinion on, epinephrine. Because few things in cardiac arrest create more debate than this drug. For decades, it's been treated like a cornerstone of resuscitation. A rhythm check happens, and someone says, go ahead and give another epi, and it becomes automatic, routine, expected. But in recent years, people started asking a difficult question. Is epinephrine actually improving meaningful survival? Or are we just getting more pulses back temporarily? The reality is epinephrine does something very well. It increases perfusion pressure, and that matters during arrest. It can help achieve ROSC, but there's another side to that conversation. The problem is what happens after ROSC, because the same vasoconstriction that helps central perfusion can also reduce microcirculation, especially in the brain. And now we're having a bigger conversation. Is survival enough? Or are we trying to preserve neurologically intact survival? Because those are not the same outcomes. This is where people get uncomfortable. Here's your street truth. ROSC is not the finish line. A pulse does not automatically equal success. Because survival matters, the quality of survival matters too. And if your entire resuscitation strategy is built around just chasing ROSC, without protecting perfusion and minimizing interruptions, you're missing the bigger picture. And that's your street truth. Why do providers get distracted? This is one of the biggest problems in modern cardiac arrest management. Providers get distracted by tasks. Not intentionally, of course, but cardiac arrest scenes create pressure, and pressure creates movement. So people start focusing on tasks, intubation, IV access, medications, monitor interpretation. And while all that's happening, CPR quality quietly deteriorates. And this is dangerous because bad CPR doesn't usually look dramatic. It looks subtle. Long pulse checks, slow compressor switches, leaning on the patient, shallow compressions, interruptions that, quote unquote, only take a few seconds, and before you know it, we're up to a minute. And all of those small losses add up. Let's be direct. Interruptions kill perfusion. Every time compressions stop, coronary perfusion pressure drops. And when compressions restart, you don't immediately return to effective perfusion. You have to rebuild it, and that takes time. So what does this mean? Every unnecessary interruption has consequences. And yet, interruptions still happen constantly during arrests for intubation, pulse checks, rhythm analysis, movement, the debatable device placement. The question is, are those interruptions worth the cost? Because sometimes they're not. Here's your next street truth. The most dangerous thing during cardiac arrest is unnecessary interruption. Not lack of medication, not lack of advanced procedures. Interruptions. Because perfusion is fragile, and every pause steals from it. That's your street truth. Now let's talk about airway, because this topic changed dramatically over the last decade. There was a time when advanced airway placement happened early, almost automatically. Get the tube, secure the airway, continue the arrest. But over time, research and experience started revealing something important. The airway itself wasn't always helping. Why? Because airway placement often came with interruptions, and interruptions hurt outcomes. So now the conversation changed. It's not how fast can we intubate, but do we actually need to intubate right now? This can be uncomfortable to talk about for some providers. When airway hurts the arrest, but it's true. A poorly timed airway attempt can absolutely worsen a resuscitation. How does this happen? The team focuses on the airway. Meanwhile, CPR pauses extend, compressor fatigue increases, rhythm checks get delayed if they happen at all, and scene organization breaks down, and suddenly the airway becomes the center of the arrest when it shouldn't be. Our top priority is perfusion, always. And if the airway intervention compromises perfusion, you need to reassess your priorities. Here's one that changes how you view cardiac arrest forever. Cardiac arrest is not an airway emergency first. It's a circulation emergency first. Oxygen matters, absolutely. But if blood isn't moving, oxygen delivery doesn't matter. Perfusion comes first, and that's your straight truth. So this is where we need to be really honest with ourselves about something. This is where we need to be honest about why BLS still matters most. A lot of successful cardiac arrest care still comes down to exceptional BLS fundamentals, not flashy interventions. Fundamentals. What actually improves outcomes? We know this. Early CPR, high quality compressions, early defibrillation, minimal interruptions. That's the core. Everything else builds around it. The problem is providers sometimes chase complexity because complexity feels advanced. But complexity without fundamentals doesn't improve outcomes. I would like to take an opportunity to share a personal story. Several years ago, when I was a fairly new paramedic, me and my partner, we got called to intercept with somebody whose husband was having severe crushing chest pain. He had the diaphoresis, he was pale, neck pain, shortness of air, nausea, the whole thing. When we got there, he demanded that we allow him to walk to our ambulance, which against his best judgment and ours, we did. He got in the ambulance and he sat on the cot, and I went to start the IV, and he said, "I don't feel well." I barely had enough time to register what he had said and start to think about what that could mean when he went into cardiac arrest. My partner and I immediately called for first responders to come and help us and drive us to the hospital. We defibrillated him once and bagged him with a BVM. He regained consciousness as we pulled into the ambulance bay about 10 minutes away. And as far as I know, is neurologically intact and survived till today. Granted, he was a healthy male and wasn't very old, but we didn't do any advanced level care. I remember distinctly walking into the ER that day and the nurses asking where his IV site was, if we got an IO, how many rounds of epi we had given, etc., etc. Complexity questions. And I was ashamed when I had to say, I didn't do any of those things. We did CPR. We defibrillated him. We bagged him with a BVM. And he woke up. And that was it. That was all. BLS still matters. We absolutely cannot talk about cardiac arrest without talking about electricity or the role of defibrillation, because early defibrillation still changes outcomes dramatically, especially in those shockable rhythms. The reality is that every minute defibrillation is delayed, we see a decrease in survival. That's why scene organization matters, CPR quality matters, and rapid rhythm recognition matters, because time matters. The key here is defibrillation works best when combined with high-quality CPR, not instead of it. Before we go further, let's talk about becoming better at cardiac arrest management, because these calls are not won through memorization alone. They're won through preparation. This episode is brought to you by EasyEMSCEU.com. If you want to improve resuscitation leadership, pit crew CPR, airway decision-making, and critical thinking under pressure, their education focuses on real-world EMS medicine. And right now for EMS Week, use promo code EMSWeek40 for 40% off all memberships. That's EMS Week 40 at EasyEMSCEU.com. Now let's talk about the providers who consistently run strong arrests, the providers who change outcomes. Because they exist. They're out there. And they all tend to share certain traits. First, they're calm. Not passive, not slow, but calm. Next, they prioritize well. They know what matters most. They control interruptions. They protect compressions aggressively. They communicate clearly. No chaos, no freelancing, no confusion. But most importantly, they think. They don't just run algorithms, they understand why the algorithm exists. So now we've talked about epinephrine, interruptions, airway timing, and perfusion priorities. In the next part, we're diving deeper into mechanical CPR realities, transport decisions, rural EMS challenges, and what strong cardiac arrest leadership actually looks like. Because this is where resuscitations are either controlled or lost. First, let's talk about the reality of mechanical CPR. Because this conversation is bigger than do you like the device or not? That's not the real issue. The real issue is understanding where it helps and where it hurts. The biggest mistake is some providers think mechanical CPR replaces strong resuscitation, and it doesn't. It amplifies whatever system already exists. If your scene is organized, it can help tremendously. If your scene is chaotic, it can absolutely make things worse. Ultimately, the device is not the solution. And this frame of mind matters because some people deploy the device and then they mentally relax, like the hard part's over. The cardiac arrest leadership doesn't stop because compressions become automated. In many ways, it becomes even more important because now you have to make sure that pauses stay short, that the placement is smooth, the team remains coordinated, and the arrest doesn't become passive. And that last point matters more than people realize. Here's your next street truth. Mechanical CPR does not fix bad resuscitation. It exposes it. If your team struggles with communication, organization, compression priorities, or leadership, the device will not save you. It will magnify every weakness already present. And that's your street truth. Now let's talk about one of the most difficult decisions in EMS, the transport problem. Transporting cardiac arrest. Because for years, a lot of EMS systems operated under one assumption: get them to the hospital. But over time, people started asking an uncomfortable question. What exactly changes during transport? Because transporting a cardiac arrest comes with costs. During transport, compressions worsen, interruptions increase, scene control decreases, and safety risks rise. And now you're trying to manage one of the most critical medical emergencies possible inside a moving vehicle. And the reality is, some arrests absolutely do need transport, but many arrests deteriorate significantly once movement begins. And if transport doesn't improve interventions or outcomes, then we have to ask ourselves, why are we moving? The stay-in-place shift. This is where many systems started evolving. And I get it. There have been some systems that have been staying on scene and working cardiac arrests for years. I was fortunate enough to come from one, but I know that there are some out there that are still scooping their cardiac arrest patients and getting them to the hospital. Instead of rushing transport, these high-quality services are focusing on high-quality on-scene resuscitation. Why? Because controlled environments improve performance. On scene, CPR quality improves, team organization improves, defibrillation timing improves, leadership improves. Everything becomes more manageable. And in many systems, outcomes improve because of this shift. But there's some emotional pressure. This can be difficult emotionally because moving quickly toward the ambulance, then moving quickly, lights and sirens, toward the hospital, feels productive to those that don't understand the stay-and-play concept. Transport feels active. Quote-unquote, standing still or staying on scene can feel uncomfortable, especially when emotions are high, especially when family is there. But great providers understand something important. Movement is not always progress. Here's a street truth that changes how you think about arrests forever. Just because you can transport a cardiac arrest doesn't mean you should. If transport destroys CPR quality, then you're sacrificing perfusion. And perfusion is the entire game. And that's your street truth. Now let's talk about something that often gets overlooked in these conversations: rural EMS and the real world. Because not every system has fire response in minutes, or multiple ALS units, or large manpower pools, or immediate hospital access. Some providers are running arrests with 2 people, long transport times, limited backup, and delayed additional resources. And in those environments, mechanical CPR changes the quality in the equation significantly. So why does this net matter? Because in rural EMS, compressor fatigue matters more. Transport safety matters more. Staffing limitations matter more. And in these settings, mechanical CPR may not just be helpful, it may be essential. This is important. EMS conversations often become too absolute depending on where you've gained your experience. It can very easily become always do this, never do that. But reality is more nuanced. We don't live or work in a black and white world. It's all varying shades of gray. Good medicine adapts to the environment, and great providers understand their context. And why does understanding this context matter? Well, because a strategy that works perfectly in a busy urban system may completely fail in a rural one, and vice versa. That's why protocol discussions alone are not enough. You have to understand staffing, geography, transport times, resource availability, and scene conditions. Because medicine does not happen in ideal environments, it happens in real ones. Here's your next street truth: the best resuscitation strategy is the one your system can execute well consistently. Not the trendiest strategy, not the most advanced strategy, the most effective one. Because consistency saves lives. That's your street truth. Leadership during cardiac arrest. This is where cardiac arrests are truly won or lost. Leadership. Not rank, not certification levels. Leadership. So what does strong leadership look like? It looks calm. It looks organized. It looks intentional. Strong leaders control pace, prioritize correctly, protect compressions, and eliminate unnecessary chaos. And perhaps most importantly, they think ahead. They anticipate. Before they move on to the next task, they're already considering that next rhythm check, compressor switching time, medication timing, airway contingency plans. They're not reacting. They're managing the entire resuscitation. You've worked with this person before. The calm provider. Heck, maybe you even are the calm provider. But this is the provider who walks into a cardiac arrest and the room settles. Not because they're loud and not because they're aggressive or they demand presence, because they're controlled, and control spreads. See, people follow calm leadership, especially during chaos. But the important part about this provider is that calm does not mean passive. It means focused. It means disciplined. It means the provider is thinking clearly despite the pressure and the chaos happening around them. Here's a street truth that separates great resuscitation leaders immediately. The louder the scene gets, the calmer the leader becomes. Because panic spreads, but control spreads too. And whichever one you project becomes the atmosphere of the arrest. That's your street truth. Let's talk about what the best teams understand. The best cardiac arrest teams understand something critical. They understand that no single intervention saves the patient. It's the combination, the consistency, the discipline, the ability to do small things correctly, over and over again without losing focus. That's what changes outcomes, not heroics, not flashy medicine. Consistent execution. Before we move into the final part, let's talk about becoming better at these calls. Because cardiac arrest leadership is not built during easy shifts. It's built during preparation, training, and understanding priorities. This episode is brought to you by easyemsceu.com. If you want education focused on real-world resuscitation, leadership under pressure, pit crew CPR, and advanced EMS decision-making, their courses are built for real providers running real calls. And right now during EMS Week, use promo code EMSWeek40 for 40% off all memberships. That's EMS Week40 at easyemsceu.com. So now we've talked about mechanical CPR, transport decisions, rural EMS realities, and leadership during arrests. And now we finish this. This is where we're going to bring everything back together. We're going to talk about what truly improves outcomes, long-term mindset shifts, and the final principle that defines elite cardiac arrest care. Because at the end of the day, cardiac arrest is not about doing everything. It's about doing what matters most and doing it exceptionally well. So now let's talk about something difficult. Maybe the hardest truth in cardiac arrest. Not every cardiac arrest is survivable. That's uncomfortable to say out loud sometimes because EMS attracts people who want to fix things. We want action, we want solutions, and we want saves. And cardiac arrest is one of the most emotionally charged calls that we run. No matter how experienced you are, there's always part of you thinking, maybe this one. And sometimes it is. Sometimes, despite excellent CPR or the organized leadership or doing everything right, the patient still dies. And this matters because providers often carry those arrests with them back to the station, home, throughout their entire career. They replay their decisions, they question their timing, and they second guess their interventions. Medicine is not magic, y'all. And understanding that is important for longevity in this profession. The goal is not perfection. The goal is excellence. To provide the highest quality resuscitation possible. To maximize the patient's chance. To give them every opportunity to survive if everything aligns properly. And then to understand that outcomes are not fully within our control. Here's your next street truth. You can do everything right and still lose the patient. That does not mean the resuscitation failed. It means cardiac arrest is one of the most difficult emergencies in medicine. And your responsibility is not to guarantee survival. Your responsibility is to provide the best opportunity for it. And that's your street truth. So, what actually improves outcomes? So after all of this, all the debate, all the technology, all the new equipment, what actually improves outcomes? Let's simplify it. The foundations still win. The fundamentals still matter most. Early CPR, high-quality compressions, early defibrillation, minimal interruptions, and organized leadership. That's still the core. Everything else only works if those things are protected. The biggest improvement in modern cardiac arrest care has not been one single intervention. It's been systems learning how to execute fundamentals better. That's the truth. So why simplicity matters? This is where providers sometimes overcomplicate things because complexity again feels advanced, but complexity often creates distraction. The best teams are not trying to do everything. They're trying to do the right things consistently, and that's a huge difference. They focus on compression quality, compression continuity, controlled airway management, clear communication, and anticipating problems early. Not unnecessary movement, not unnecessary procedures, execution, and execution of the basics consistently. Here's a street truth that every provider needs to hear. Cardiac arrest is not complicated because medicine is complicated. It's complicated because humans lose focus under pressure. That's why discipline matters. That's why structure matters. That's why leadership matters. Because the medicine itself, the priorities are actually quite simple. Protect perfusion, protect oxygenation, minimize interruptions. That's your straight truth. Let's talk briefly about the provider who changes the room. You've seen this provider before. Again, walks into the cardiac arrest, everything changes. The room becomes calmer, more organized, more focused. Again, not because they're loud and not because they're intimidating, because they understand priorities. Confidence builds on understanding, and that changes everything. They don't chase the call. They control it. They don't panic over monitor changes. They don't rush unnecessary interventions. They protect what matters most. And over time, that changes outcomes. Those providers change outcomes. Let's acknowledge something else, the emotional side of resuscitation. Cardiac arrests stay with providers, not always because they were traumatic, sometimes because they were close, because you almost got them back, because you did get them back briefly, because the family was watching, because the patient looked young. These calls carry emotional weight. And if you stay in this profession long enough, you'll carry some of them with you forever. Carrying these calls with you, that's normal because resuscitation is emotionally intense. You are literally fighting against death in real time, and that affects people. But one thing helps. Knowing you ran the arrest well, knowing the team was disciplined, knowing the priorities stayed intact. Because even when outcomes are bad, strong medicine still matters. Here's your final street truth. The goal of cardiac arrest care is not to look impressive. It's to give the patient the best possible chance. That means discipline over chaos, consistency over heroics, and fundamentals over ego. Because outcomes are built on execution, not appearance. That's your street truth. So what does this mean moving forward? If there's one thing this episode should change, it's how you view priorities during cardiac arrest. Not everything matters equally, and understanding that changes how you lead these calls. So what changes now? Hopefully, you protect compressions aggressively. You minimize interruptions. You think critically about airway timing. You understand where mechanical CPR fits, and you focus on disciplined leadership. And most importantly, you stop chasing unnecessary complexity. Because better medicine is not always more medicine. Sometimes it's just better execution. Cardiac arrest in 2026 is not about having the most equipment. It's not about the newest device. It's not about who can perform the flashiest intervention. It's about understanding what truly changes outcomes and protecting those priorities under pressure. That's what elite resuscitation looks like. Not chaos. Control. Before we close, if you want to become better at these calls, not just memorizing algorithms, but truly understanding resuscitation, go check out easyemsceu.com. Their education is built around real-world EMS medicine, cardiac arrest leadership, critical thinking under pressure, and airway and resuscitation strategy. And during EMS Week, use promo code EMSWeek40 for 40% off all memberships. That's EMS Week 40 at easyemsceu.com. Every once in a while, we take 10 minutes to recognize the people, moments, and ideas that define this profession. Not the flashy parts, not the headlines, but the foundation. This week's Platinum 10 Minutes is about something bigger than any single call, bigger than any single provider. This is about EMS Week. The ones who came before us, the ones carrying it forward, and the ones still to come, and what it represents. Because EMS Week is not just another date on the calendar. It's not just social media posts, challenge coins, t-shirts, or free station lunches. It's a reminder of where this profession came from, how far it has come, and the people who sacrificed to build it into what it is today. the early days of EMS. It's hard for newer providers to imagine sometimes, but modern EMS is still relatively young. There was a time in this country when emergency medical care looked completely different. No standardized EMS systems, no advanced pre hospital medicine, no coordinated trauma systems. In many places, patients were transported in hearses, police cars, private vehicles. Training varied wildly. Equipment was limited, and outcomes suffered because of it. Then something changed. People started recognizing a problem. Communities realized that critically ill and injured patients needed something more than just transportation. They needed care. And from that realization, EMS began evolving. The birth of modern EMS. One of the biggest turning points came in 1966 with a document that changed emergency medicine forever. Accidental death and disability, the neglected disease of modern society. That report exposed something difficult. America's trauma and emergency response systems were failing people, and suddenly the country was forced to pay attention. Out of that push came standardized EMS education, modern ambulance standards, emergency communication systems, advanced life support programs, and trauma center development. And over time, EMS transformed. Not overnight, and not perfectly, but steadily. And that transformation happened because people before us pushed for something better, honoring the ones who built this profession. That's where this segment really begins, with gratitude, because every EMS provider working today benefits from people that they've never met before. Providers, educators, medical directors, researchers, advocates, people who pushed this profession forward long before modern EMS looked the way that it does now. People who fought for better education and better protocols, better equipment, better recognition, and better patient care. And many of them did so without recognition, without praise, without social media. They simply believed that EMS could become something greater. And because of that belief, we inherited a profession stronger than the one that they started with. The providers who came before us. Think about the generations before us for a minute. Providers who worked with limited tools, learned through experience, built systems from the ground up, ran calls in environments far more primitive than what we know now. And despite those limitations, they showed up day after day, night after night, responding to people on the worst days of their lives. Some of them spent entire careers building the standards that we now take for granted, and many of them never received the recognition that they deserved. So during EMS week, we acknowledge them and we thank them because this profession did not appear out of nowhere. It was built, and building it required sacrifice. The educators who shape providers. EMS is not sustained by equipment or protocols or certifications. It's sustained by education. And that means this week also belongs to the educators, the instructors who stay late after class, the mentors who answer questions after difficult calls, the field training officers who shape new providers, the people who understand that teaching EMS is about far more than memorization. It's about preparing people for reality, for pressure, for uncertainty, for decision making. And great educators understand something important. Every student they train will eventually stand at someone's bedside during a crisis. And that responsibility matters. And the educators who truly care about this profession carry that responsibility heavily. So to every EMS educator, thank you, because your impact extends far beyond the classroom. The administrators and leaders who push the profession forward. Leadership in EMS is difficult. It's easy to criticize systems and policies and budgets and decisions. But there are administrators and leaders throughout this profession genuinely working to improve it. People fighting for better education, better provider wellness, better staffing, better equipment, and better patient care systems. People trying to move EMS forward despite enormous challenges. And whether those efforts happen in large urban systems or small rural agencies, they matter. Because leadership shapes culture, and culture shapes outcome. Now let's talk about the people currently out there doing the work. the current providers carrying the weight, the EMTs, the paramedics, the dispatchers, the firefighters, the nurses working beside EMS crews, the providers answering calls at 2 a.m., running cardiac arrests, managing overdoses, responding to trauma, and comforting families. People carrying emotional and physical burdens the public rarely sees. And they continue to show up anyway, shift after shift, even when they're tired, even when the system feels strained, even when the job becomes emotionally heavy. That dedication deserves recognition because this profession is not easy, and yet every day, people continue choosing to serve. EMS is more than medicine. One thing people outside EMS often misunderstand is that this profession is about far more than medicine. Yes, we perform skills, and yes, we manage emergencies. But EMS is also compassion, presence, calm during chaos, leadership under pressure, and humanity on someone's worst day. And those things matter just as much as any intervention. EMS week can feel complicated for some providers because while we celebrate the profession, many providers also carry difficult memories, calls that stayed with them, partners they miss, moments they still replay. And that's part of EMS too. This profession changes people, sometimes in beautiful ways and sometimes in painful ones. But regardless, the work matters, the effort matters, and the people doing it matter. Now let's talk about the next generation for a minute. The future of EMS, the students, the new EMTs, the new medics, the people just entering this profession. You are entering EMS during a time of enormous change. Medicine is evolving. Technology is evolving. Expectations are evolving. And that means the future of EMS depends on people willing to continue pushing the profession forward. So here's the encouragement. Stay curious. Never stop learning and never become comfortable with good enough. Question things. Think critically. Learn from experienced providers, but also bring fresh ideas into the profession. Because EMS grows when new providers challenge old limitations respectfully and intelligently. The responsibility of growth. One of the biggest responsibilities in EMS is continuing education. Because this profession changes constantly. Protocols evolve, research evolves, best practices evolve. And the providers who stop learning, they eventually fall behind. That's why continuing education matters so much. Not because of a certification requirement, but because patients deserve providers who continuously improve. That's what EMS Week should really represent. Not just celebration, but commitment. Commitment to excellence, commitment to growth, commitment to honoring the providers who built this profession by continuing to improve it. Because EMS is not static. It's constantly becoming something new, and every provider listening right now plays a role in shaping what comes next. And if you're serious about continuing to grow in this profession, that's exactly why we built EasyEMSCEU.com. Because EMS education should be more than just passing a test. It should help you think better, lead better, care for patients better. The goal is not just certification. The goal is to become a stronger provider. And during EMS Week, we want to encourage as many providers as possible to continue investing in themselves. So right now, use promo code EMSWeek40 for 40% off all memberships at EasyEMSCEU.com. That's EMSWeek40. Because this profession deserves providers who never stop learning. This week's Platinum 10 Minutes goes to everyone connected to EMS. The pioneers who built it, the educators who sustain it, the leaders pushing it forward, the providers carrying the weight today and every day, and the future providers who will shape what comes next. EMS is not perfect, but it is built on service, on sacrifice, on resilience, and on people who continue showing up when others need them the most. And that's worth recognizing. Happy EMS Week, everybody. This has been the Platinum 10 Minutes. This is your show. Real EMS, real decisions, real growth. Stay disciplined, stay focused, and protect what matters most. I'll see you the next episode. Every EMS provider has heard it before. Scene safe. And most of the time, we answer too fast. Because danger in EMS doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes it's violence, sometimes it's chaos, sometimes it's a scene that feels just a little off, right before everything changes. Next episode, we're talking about the calls that make your instincts matter more than your skills. Domestic disputes, drug scenes, weapons calls, crowds turning hostile, unpredictable patients, and the mistakes providers make that put them in danger without even realizing it. This time, we're not having the conversation alone. We're bringing on a law enforcement officer guest to talk about what first responders need to understand about scene safety from both sides of the radio. Because survival on dangerous scenes is not luck. It's awareness, preparation, positioning, and knowing when something doesn't feel right. We're breaking down the most dangerous EMS scenes and how to survive them. Because your patient can't be helped if you become the next victim. This is one episode every EMS provider needs to hear. I'll see you next episode. Well, folks, I'm 10-8 for now. Thanks for joining me on the Goldman Hour and for the Platinum 10 Minutes. Please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out all our cool extras at easyemsceu.com/podcast and become a member of G-Shift. Don't hesitate to reach out. I love hearing from my listeners, and if you send me an article or topic I use on my podcast, you'll for sure get a shout out. Until we're all 1041 together again, y'all stay safe out there.